A strategy of power, disruption, and unpredictability. Donald Trump's vision for America is not merely a collection of policies, it is a strategy rooted in force, disruption, and a belief in the raw assertion of national power. It is a game plan that seeks to reshape the global order while simultaneously consolidating control at home. It thrives on division, thrives on confrontation, and above all thrives on unpredictability. To understand Trump's endgame, one must dissect his actions and rhetoric, not in isolation, but as parts of a broader campaign aimed at asserting dominance, economically, politically, and militarily. At the heart of his domestic strategy lies a promise to rebuild American greatness, though his methods are far from conventional. His economic nationalism rejects the principles of free trade in favor of tariffs and protectionism, believing that by erecting barriers, he can force industries back onto American soil. He sees trade wars not as a danger but as a tool, wielding them with the confidence of a businessman accustomed to high-stakes negotiation. Yet history suggests that tariffs seldom deliver prosperity. His previous trade war with China strained American farmers, inflated consumer prices, and did little to revive the industrial heartland. If he escalates this fight, as he has promised, inflation could rise further, markets could reel, and the American middle class, the very group he claims to champion, may find itself paying the price. Alongside his economic doctrine is an unyielding stance on immigration, one that plays to fears and nationalistic sentiments. His promise of mass deportations and militarization of the southern border are not just policy points, but signals to his base, a reinforcement of the idea that America is under siege and that he alone can defend it. It is a strategy of division, designed to keep his supporters energized and his critics perpetually on the defensive. Yet his ambitions extend far beyond American borders. His foreign policy, driven by instinct rather than doctrine, is built upon the notion that alliances are transactional, that power must be projected, and that adversaries must be confronted head-on. Nowhere is this clearer than in his approach to China. He sees China as America's great economic rival and believes that tariffs, military pressure, and technological decoupling are the means to contain its rise. But China, no longer the passive manufacturing hub of decades past, has countermeasures of its own. It has steadily reduced its holdings of US Treasury bonds, and if pushed too far, it could accelerate efforts to dethrone the dollar as the world's reserve currency. The consequences of such a move would be profound, shaking the very foundations of American economic supremacy. Trump's geopolitical maneuvering does not stop with China. His overtures to India signal an attempt to forge a counterweight to Beijing, but India, ever pragmatic, will not fully align with Washington. It will take what benefits it can, strengthening its own position while avoiding direct entanglement in Trump's game. Likewise, his fascination with Russia suggests a desire to drive a wedge between Moscow and Beijing. But here too, the strategy is flawed. Russia, deeply entwined with China through trade and military cooperation, is unlikely to abandon its closest strategic ally for the uncertain promise of American favor. Trump's ambitions stretch into the realm of raw military power, where his rhetoric has often hinted at interventionism, though always framed in the language of dominance rather than obligation. The South China Sea, a flashpoint of growing tensions, is one arena where his policies could trigger direct confrontation. The recent escalation between Chinese and Australian military forces, China firing flares at an Australian jet followed by naval drills off Australia's coast, is a warning. It signals that Beijing will not back down, that it is prepared to meet provocation with force. If Trump chooses to escalate US military presence in the Pacific, he risks setting off a chain of events that neither side may be able to control. Yet for all his global maneuvering, Trump's ultimate goal remains power, both for himself and for the vision he represents. He has already shown a willingness to erode institutional checks, to reshape the judiciary in his favor, and to cast doubt on the very mechanisms of democracy itself. A second term would likely see these efforts intensified. He may seek to replace career officials with loyalists, to use the Department of Justice as a tool against political enemies, to consolidate media influence through friendly networks and social platforms. If his past behavior is any indication, he will push every boundary, test every norm, and dare the system to stop him. But power is never without resistance. The American political landscape remains deeply polarized. And while his supporters see him as a champion, his detractors see a threat to the very fabric of democracy. Internationally, his hardline tactics may drive traditional allies further away, accelerating the decline of American influence rather than cementing it. Economic turmoil, military entanglements, and internal strife could all be the unintended consequences of his strategy. Trump believes he can reshape the world through sheer force of will. His game plan is one of confrontation, of bending reality to fit his vision of American supremacy. But history has shown that such ambitions often end not in triumph but in chaos. The question is not whether Trump will push forward, he will. The question is whether the world and America itself is prepared for the consequences.